you? How are you?
All
Is
right.
my internet okay, or am I freezing?
You might be.
You look good to me.
I think we're all good. Can you guys
Mine's
see and
okay,
hear
good.
me okay?
You're freezing a little bit, and then Julie was freezing a little bit. So then I was like, that must be me.
I'm not sure. It might be
I'm just wondering if
me.
it's my internet connection.
I hope not. Okay, we should be all good. So it is 10:32, and I will not waste another second because we have a fantastic speaker back again with us in rooms, David Keesee. He is a fantastic real estate coach and speaker, and so I'm not sure how many of you were able to catch the incredible room that he did back in December with us. That was a mindset moves room. So this is a continuation of that series. And so I will not waste another second. I'll let him take over. Thanks for joining us,
Cool.
David.
My pleasure. And I thank all of you so much for being here. There's a lot of things that you can coach on and train in real estate, right? Like there's a lot of things we need to work on. There's a lot of value that coaches can bring to you. For instance, here's some scripts, here's some dialogue, here's an open house framework to do. Here's how you get referrals from your CRM and all these kinds of things. But there seems to be, what I've noticed, this thing called the tyranny of how. Like, it's not that you don't know how to do things. Like, it's interesting. I will be doing one of our events, and I'll even introduce this concept of it's not how. It's really more about who, right? And I'll say, you don't want to be an Indian. How? You want to be like an owl. Who, right? And it's more about asking who, not how. And I'll give you an example of that. At these seminars, I will say, hey, I'm going to show this to you. I want you to raise your hand and tell me. Let's start with the morning, right when I wake up. What's the ideal schedule that you think I should have? I'm your coaching client. You coach me. And somebody will be like, well, you got to wake up in the morning. You got to work out. I'm like, okay, I'm going to work out in the morning. Oh, you got to meditate. Okay. Oh, you got to journal. Oh, you got to get ready for the morning. Okay, great. Now what do I do first thing in the office? Oh, right when you get in the office, you got to do lead generation. You got to do it. I got to get it done. I'm like, all right, great. Then what I got to do? You got to do lead follow-up. And they walk me through the whole daily schedule. And I'm like, congratulations. All of you know the exact schedule to have. You know exactly what to do. You know even how to do it. But for some reason, we don't. And so I just want you to consider something. If we take a look at the challenge you're facing inside your business, is your problem actually your problem? Is it actually your problem? Because what I've discovered, it's not actually your problem. You say, you know what? There are people who will apply for my coaching, and I'll get on the phone with them because I like to interview everybody that comes into my coaching first. I want to make sure it's a good fit for them. So I'm asking them, say, hey, what's the biggest challenge you have? And they're like, oh man, lead generation. I just can't seem to generate leads. Can't figure it out. Can't figure out the game of lead generation. I'm like, okay, great. And how often do you actually do your lead generation? How often do you do the videos? How often do you do your calls and stuff like that? And I'm like, see, that's the thing is I'm not consistent. I'm like, okay, so is the problem lead generation? Or is the problem consistency? And then I'll ask them this question. Let's say over the last 6 months that you were consistent every single day. You did your videos, you did your email campaigns, you sent your postcards, you made your conversations every single day over the last 6 months. What do you think would happen to your business? Where do you think it would be right now? They're like, oh, I'd be killing it. So the problem is not lead generation. In fact, you might even say, well, yes, the problem is discipline. That's not even the problem because discipline is also a symptom of the real challenge. And maybe that challenge is your mindset. So it's like, well, what moves do you make in order to get yourself to do the things you know you must do? There's a really good book called Atomic Habits. And in that book, he refers to the idea that you're never going to operate outside of a way that you see yourself. Your identity is the most important part of what you do. I'll give you an example. When I was writing my first book, it became an international bestseller, actually, in 11 categories. It's a good book. When I was writing that book, my team was like, hey, do we have chapter 1? I'm like, oh yeah, I'll get to it, man. I gotta get to it. Next week, hey, do we have chapter 1? I'm like, I'm gonna get to it. And then a mentor of mine said, you know why you're having a hard time writing a book? I said, why? He said, because you don't consider yourself an author yet. Who's more consistent writing the book? Is it somebody who considers themselves to be an author, or is it somebody who's writing a book? Right? Like in baseball, for a lot of you that know me, you know that I played professional baseball growing up. Well, somebody asked my father one time, how is your son so consistent practicing all the time? And he said something really profound. He said, most kids are playing baseball. David's a baseball player. There's a difference, right? So like, are you playing the game called real estate, or are you being a real estate agent? Because when you identify as a real estate agent, and you see a lot of people in our industry, they don't want to be. They're like ashamed to be. I'm not a real estate agent. I'm a consultant. I'm a matchmaker. All these different words we're coming up with. Like, no, you're a real estate agent. Do you guys realize that back in the day, real estate agents were seen as like they were revered as a professional discipline? Like, oh my gosh, you're a real estate agent. You must be successful. And then over time, we've just let that degrade. And so I just want you to consider being a real estate agent is one of the most demanding, challenging professions that there is. And it's one of the most lucrative businesses you can have if you're good at it. But what I would say is this: I want you to write down your goal. Write down your goal for income. And I want to use income. There are a lot of things to use as goals: health, fitness, happiness. Yes, but the easiest one to quantify is money. So we'll just use money as an example, and you can apply it to whatever you want. I want you to write down your income goal. And then I want you to add a 0 to the end of it. Just see the faces. I was like, oh yeah, 0. Oh, what is that? That's an identity issue. Always. Some people laugh, like when I do that in seminars, they'll laugh or whatever it is. But I want you to consider this. Even if you don't add a 0, I want you to ask yourself this question: are you being somebody who makes that kind of money? I had a mentor in 2000, I think it was 12 or 13, somewhere in there. I had my goal written up on the board. And he came in, he didn't say anything, brought his coffee, sat down in my office, because he worked in the office too. He was our president. He sat down and he looked at me and he was like, huh. And he looked at my goal and he said, what do you suppose somebody who makes that kind of money does all day? It's an interesting question, isn't it? And he got up and walked out. And that made me think. I started going, okay, there's what I do and what I'm making, and there's what that version of me does and what that version makes. Because here's what we know. There's really only a couple things you need to do to reach that goal. I'm going to simplify this whole thing for you. It's not complicated. It comes down to one of two things. Either one, you need to think about it differently. And I'll explain what it is in a second. You need to think about it differently. It's not mindset. We like to use that mindset deal. Like, people love that buzzword, mindset. But what I'm talking about is you having the ability to see a scenario differently, you looking at it differently. I'll give you an example. If I told you to look at my hand right now, I'd say, describe my hand. And you'd be like, oh, there's knuckles. And I'd be like, I don't see any knuckles. And you'd be like, oh, there's hair. I see hair. I'm like, I don't see hair. But as soon as I go, everything opens up and I can never see my hand the same way again. Now I see it the way you see it, right? So it's you starting to see things differently. And there's a few things I want you to get good at seeing differently. Number one is your worldview. If you want to go to the next level in your business and in your life, it is required that you see the world differently. Albert Einstein said this: do we ultimately live in a hostile or a friendly environment? That's the question you have to ask yourself, because if you live in a hostile environment, it's pretty tough to make calls. Because a hostile environment, people are going to reject you. That's why a lot of times when I say, why aren't you making calls? Well, I'm afraid of rejection. I just say, what rejection? Like, I used to experience rejection too. I used to be afraid of calls too, until I realized there's not a single person on planet except for my wife that's rejected me. They don't even know who I am. When they say, I'm not interested, they don't even know my name. If I hung up the phone and somebody called back and said, hey, what was the name of that guy that called you? They'd go, I don't know. They didn't reject me. They rejected the idea of real estate at this moment. But what we end up doing is we see the world as, it's me. I'm a fraud. They caught me. I'm a slime bucket. None of that is true. So how can you look at it differently? One of the things that I tell most agents is this: if you can switch from selling to serving, and you can change the way you think about it that way, that sales is a service, I'm helping people, it changes the game for you. So the first one is your worldview. How do you think the world works? Is the world hostile? Is it friendly? It's pretty trippy right now. If you get on TikTok, Instagram, if you get online, you're gonna be sold. We're dying. All of us are gonna die. This is coming. You hear this? Something big is coming. And there's all this fear mongering. But then you walk outside and the birds are chirping. And the sun's out. And it's totally normal. Which world do you want to live in? They're both available. But I'm not talking about mindset. I'm talking about switching the way you see the world. Some people, when they look out the window, they see the beautiful sunset. Some people can't not see the spots on the window. Oh my God, these spots on the window. You're missing the sunset, right? So can you change? Can you actively be aware and change the way that you see things about the world? The second one is your self-view. What if you just changed the way you saw yourself? My brother asked me a question one time, who's been a mentor for me my whole life. He said this. He said, who would you be if you lost all of your memory? If you lost all memory up to this moment, you have no short-term memory, no long-term memory. You literally don't remember anything about you or the world. Who would you be? And I sat there and I thought about it. I was like, that's a tough question. And I imagined it. And I imagined having no memory and looking in the mirror, and I answered this answer. I said, I'd be whoever I say I am. And he said, that's correct. The biggest thing stopping you is the false beliefs that you've acquired over the years from your past, of what you think is possible for yourself, what you think you can actually pull off, what you think is ugly about you, what you think is gross about you, what you think is amazing about you. And do you know that they've done studies in psychology that show that human beings, when recalling the past, are 70% inaccurate? 70%. That means 70% of the stuff you think about you ain't accurate. So can you change the way that you see the marketplace? Can you change the way that you see the world? Can you change the way that you see yourself? Because if you do that, you take off. And that's one of the two things you got to be able to do to get to the next level. That's it. I don't care what seminar you go to, who's trying to help you, any of that. There's only two things, one of two things, maybe both, that you need to do to go to the next level. It is not anything else. It's not some secret software. It's not a CRM. It's not a strategy. It is, number one, do you have the ability to think differently in a way that's more effective? Number two is, do you have the acquired skill sets? And some of those go together, right? So like I'll tell you, what are one of the sales skills you need? What are one of the skills you need for real estate? It's sales skills. You need to be able to have a conversation and get somebody to say yes and get inspired. But it's the way you think about sales that causes you to not build sales skills. You see what I'm saying? So like, even thinking about sales itself, changing the way you see it, changing the way you see yourself. One of the things that I'm going to go back to this mindset thing, because that's really what we're talking about. But just know those are the two things. One, you need to think about it differently. Or number two, you need to acquire a skill set. Typically, that's going to be marketing, sales, or leadership. It's going to be one of those. There's nothing else for you to do. Everything else is easy. Everything else is acquirable. It's one of those two things that gets you to the next level. I'll give you an example with my wife, Taylor. She goes, oh my God, what would happen if we weren't together? I'm like, I'd move on. And I would hope you would too. She goes, don't you need me? And I said, no. Mm-mm. She goes, oh my God, I need you. And I'm like, no, you don't. Girl, you're smoking hot. You can literally go back into the marketplace right now. On demand. In fact, I'm hoping you don't wake up and realize that one day, lest I be out of a wife. You're smoking hot. I said, I don't need you. I choose you because I know what needing somebody led to. I've got a trail of dead relationships to prove it. I said, I wake up every day and I look for the things that made me fall in love with you. I consciously do it every single day. Even the things that annoy me, I find a way to make those endearing and cute, and realizing that there's one day I won't be mad at you for not putting your toothbrush away because it won't be there. And so now I look at it and I'm like, so I start playing a game with her. Like she walked into the bathroom, she put her, it's not that she doesn't put it away, she puts it right in front of mine. And I'm like, you have a sink right over there. We have 2 sinks for a reason. She's like, yeah, but I want your sink. And I'm like, so I just walked in the other day. She was sitting there in the morning. I took a shower, did my thing. She walked in. I took her toothbrush. I threw it away. She was like, oh, I can't believe you did that. I'm like, it was the last time you'll do that. Gentlemen, that's not a good strategy. I ended up buying like 10 more toothbrushes because she's like, fine, I'll just stash them away. So all that to say, can you make life simple, easy, and fun in your mind? Can you look at your spouse differently to appreciate them and see them in a different way? Can you look at your business differently? Can you look at yourself differently? That is the skill to learn. And then the other one is learning the skills that are relevant to you making money, which is marketing, sales, leadership. If you make those moves, you're going to win the game. There's one other move that I want to talk about, though, that stops a lot of this. And it's this. There's 2 concepts that I'm always teaching inside my coaching program. And the 2 concepts are resistance versus acceptance. So I'll give you an example. I've got a coaching client who is always complaining about her business, about her partners, about her relationship. And I said, at some point, you have to accept how life is and act accordingly. You wishing that things would change leads to resistance. They're not going to change. She's like, well, how do I talk them out of that? I'm like, you can't talk people out of their delusions. Stop trying to talk people out of their delusions. Look at our political landscape in this world. How's that working out, trying to talk the other side out? How does that work out? It doesn't work out really well. All they do is put their feet firmly more in the ground. They put their flag more in the ground. You can't talk people out of it. You have to accept. And I want you to understand this. What you resist keeps going. You inflame the situation when you resist. And that could be anything. That could be the person that cuts you off. I used to get serious road rage. I got it from my dad. My dad still has it. And when I was younger, I used to get so pissed. Like, you know what? I'm going to show them. I'm going to follow them home like a freak. I'm going to go crazy. Until I realized one time that resistance isn't isolated. When you get mad at your neighbor, when you get mad at somebody cutting you off, that resistance starts like a little seed, and then it bleeds into everywhere else in your life. And so I started to say stuff like this when somebody would cut me off. I'm like, oh my God, I hope they're okay. Maybe they're going to the hospital. Maybe they have a loved one in the hospital they're rushing to. And by the way, if that was the case, would you not let them cut in front of you? Of course you would. Same action, looked at differently. I'm grateful that I could be the one to give you the space to rush to the hospital. But how do we act? We act like they knew it was, there's Julie, cut her off. They're not doing that. They don't know who the hell you are. They're in their life, lifing along. But then you resist it. And really what it ends up doing is affecting your life. Here's what we need to know. Snake bites don't kill people. Nobody has ever died from a snake bite, ever. What kills people is the venom that continues after the bite to pour through their veins. And you get bit by these little gardener snakes and you freak out. And what I'm asking you to do is stop resisting life, stop resisting people, stop resisting markets, and be in full, complete acceptance of people and things. I learned this from my mentor, Matthew. When he taught me to accept things and not resist them, what I realized was if I accept the scenario, I can change it. I can accept it and I can transform it in a way that works for me. But if I resist it, it just gets worse and I stay in the same spot. And so what I'm asking you to do is, one, be open to. The ultimate sign of a mature mind is a mind that is open to everything and attached to nothing. Like, can you actually be open to an idea that you disagree with? That's how growth happens. When people say, well, I never change my mind. I'm like, then you don't grow. I do not believe the same things about the world that I believed when I was 15 years old. I see it very differently. Very differently. I used to judge my mom and dad. I'm like, I can't believe you and mom argue all the time. And then I got married and I'm like, I get it. You wake up, there they are. You go to bed, there they are. You go to eat dinner, there they are. And you're just like, man, how do you resolve this? I mean, you knew this when you had best friends and you guys would fight. Your parents would be like, you're hanging out too much. Just get a little separation. How's that work out in marriage? It doesn't. You better figure out a way to make it work, right? And so, like, I believe different things now. So a wise mind has the ability to switch the way they think about things. And I would just have you look at a couple of things, just to paraphrase our conversation today. Number one, is your problem actually your problem? Be honest with yourself. Like, is that the problem? People are like, everything happens for a reason. I'm like, yeah, sometimes because you're lazy. That's why. That's why it happened. Like, so, yes, everything happens for a reason, but like, be honest with yourself. Is your problem actually your problem? What is happening to you happens to all of us. Maybe not at the same time, and we certainly don't have the same experience because we're all different human beings. But the sun went down on all of us. Inflation is happening to all of us. The market is happening to all of us. It's not just that buyer that can't buy a house because they can't afford it. It is a whole part of America that can't. It's happening. But the question is, the game to play, if you're a competitive person, which I bet you are, if you're on this call, I bet you're slightly competitive. If you're competitive, if it's happening to all of us and you want to win the game, react and respond to those things like a champion, because most people don't. So you being able to change the way you think about it. I'll give you an example. It's a competitive advantage for you to be able to do this with your mindset. So one is like, is your problem your problem, and really get down to what the real issue is so you can solve it. But the other one is changing the way you think about it. When I was in professional baseball, obviously in Little League, I dominated. In high school, I dominated. In college, I dominated. And you get to pro ball and you realize everybody's good. Like, everybody's good. I always crack up when I hear people watch a Major League Baseball game and they're like, oh, this guy stinks. I'm like, you have no idea what you're saying. Like, they're not good. They're friggin' elite. You take the worst MLB player and you put him, it won't even be close. And yet you get to that level, right? And so you got to be a little creative. And so I remember when I was in AA, I was trying to steal off this catcher. Nobody could steal off this catcher. He just had such a good arm that if you tried to steal off him, he would throw you out. And I told my manager, I said, I'll bet you $100 I steal off this catcher. He's like, no way. I'm like, I'll bet you $100. And so what I did is I realized, if I resist and I just try to steal off this catcher, he's going to throw me out. I'm not that fast. I wasn't a fast person. I had average speed. But I did know that there's more than one way. And so what I did is I took a really big lead because this guy had a really good arm. And because he has a really good arm, he likes to show it off. And so I was just a little bit smarter. I took a really big lead off first base. I made him back pick and try to pick me off at first. And when he threw it to first, I walked into second. First baseman caught the ball, went to tag me. I wasn't there. And he was like, what? And I was like, stole it. He's like, that's not fair. You didn't steal it off the catcher. I'm like, I did steal it off the catcher. It's just nobody had thought about that. And the way that I came to that conclusion, and it became a thing, it became the Keesee steal. Like, I would steal the base outright, but not like the traditional way. Like, the pitcher would be holding the ball and I would just take third base and be like, what happened? And that came because I didn't resist the situation. It came because I went, look, we just have to accept that's a great catcher, but that doesn't mean that's a great first baseman. That doesn't mean that's a great pitcher. That's just a great catcher. So how do I take him out of the mix? And I just accept it and I transform the situation. I want you to do that. It's an unfair advantage. The person who has a flexible mindset has an unfair advantage. Flexibility being the key word, okay? And then the last one is, let's be honest. Do you have the skill sets to reach those goals? And I promise, like, I'm looking at you guys. You got the talent. You're good looking. Look at you. You got personality skills. You just got to develop actual sales and marketing skills, and anybody can acquire those. I've taken people in my program that when they come in the program, I'm like, dear God, please let this work. I don't know that they have the talent, and that skill sets are just acquirable. They just are. Sales and marketing is not for the talented. I wasn't. I was just a talker. I could just blah, 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 blah. But then when it came to selling, I couldn't actually sell. People were like, how are you not making millions of dollars? I'm like, I don't know, right? Like, I'm charismatic. But it didn't matter because I didn't know how to sell. I could just talk. There's a difference, right? So just know most of the issues that you're running into, it's not, I know sometimes it feels overwhelming, right? You probably, especially in this economy, especially in this market that we're in, it can feel overwhelming. But if you can just ask yourself, what's the challenge I'm facing? Okay, why do I have that challenge? Okay, what's causing that challenge though? And you get down to the root of what it really is, what you'll discover is this. The only thing you have to do to win in your business and life is to control the things that you can control. You can't control the market. You can't control the economy. You can't control other people's feelings. You can only control a few things. You can control what you decide to make things mean, which is what I'm talking about, choosing the way you look at it. I'm going to make this mean this for me. The story, you get to choose. You get to choose what you're going to focus on, and you get to choose the choices you make. What unsuccessful people do is they worry about the things they can't change. And what that does is it robs them from controlling, passes on without them. And they think that time will bring them certainty. Ladies and gentlemen, time will not bring you certainty. The only thing that will bring you certainty is action and making decisions. That's what will bring you certainty. So I hope that supports you. 3 things. What's your actual problem? Dig down deep on that. Number 2, develop the skill set of seeing it differently, thinking about the situation differently, and then develop skill sets, sales, marketing, leadership. It's just in those areas, nowhere else to look, okay? Are there any questions? I want to leave a couple minutes for questions. Are there any questions, comments, or hallucinations, or emotional freakouts, or any of that? Taylor came home
You're
with
the
a coffee.
best, David.
I love
always
it. Thank you.
Yeah, I always appreciate getting to hear, like, really perspective is so much of what you teach. And I think that it's so key in life, right? Just being able to
Yep.
look at things from a different lens.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I really push on that, Julie, is that, like, I believe that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And when the things you look at change, you take different actions. It's like that for you, and it's like that for your clients. The reason your clients aren't making decisions right now is they're just scared. But as soon as it's not scary, they have new information, they make faster decisions, right? Because when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So I really appreciate that. And I love hanging out with you guys too.
Thank you so much, David.
You're very, very
thank you.
welcome. Thanks,
Thank
Tiffany.
you.
You're welcome.
It's always such a pleasure to have you with us in rooms. And so I know I learned a lot about that. You can, anything that you pretty much are saying, you can relate back to your life and withdraw that meaning in some way, shape, or form. So this was very helpful for myself, actually, as well, too.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
And so thank you always for your time and your words. They have tremendous impact. And so I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I will be making sure to send a follow-up email plugging some of David's socials and website in case anyone wants to get a hold of him. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their Thursday. We have another room that's going to be starting pretty soon. So if anyone would like to join, that is an option as well. But again, thank you all once again for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Have a good day, everybody.
Have a good day.
See ya.